Sonic X Shadow Generations, one of the most complete Sonic the Hedgehog packages I've ever seen, combining an already great compilation of Sonic's best levels with an all-new lore-heavy narrative that offers a really fresh perspective of Sonic's modern era is genius, and is the exact thing the Sonic series needs right now. But, should you buy it, and is it really the Sonic game I've always wanted? Well, the answer to both of those questions is an astounding yes, and here's why. Now, I'm gonna start with the Shadow Generations half of the game, because that's what you came here to see, and that's what I was most hyped to check out, and oh my god was it worth the wait. Right on startup, they made this little prologue movie to get newer Sonic fans up to speed on everything, and it's such a beautifully wrapped, refined version of Shadow's backstory. And the cutscene that follows it up, introducing us to Maria and Gerald Robotnik for the first time in decades, was equally incredible. That transition from his memories on the Ark to present day was clean as hell, and it illustrates the stark contrast between his warm inception and his current cold, unresolved state. But before he can drown in his own misery, Rouge calls from Sonic's birthday party on the Sonic Generations side of the story and basically allows Shadow to exposition dump. It's a small thing, but I love how they intertwine the stories like this. It allows the plot to be its own thing entirely, while still connecting it to the game it shares the package with, and justifying the Time Eater's return and the older levels. But that cutscene leads right into the first stage and our first look at Shadow's new gameplay. And I gotta say, he plays great. When gameplay footage first dropped, there were a lot of comparisons drawn between this and the Sonic Frontier cyberspace levels, and I just don't see it. Sure, they're both traditional A to B Sonic stages, but those are crazy restrictive and basic in design, and these are some of the most open-ended and creative boost Sonic levels ever made. I mean, you can boost in both of them, and the buttons are mapped about the same, but controlling Shadow feels significantly different. I went back and played Frontiers to make sure. Trust me, it's not the same. Sonic's gameplay was built primarily with intent to explore a fully open world. It's very loose, free, and the boost is more mandatory than rewarding because of how slow his base speed is. Shadow, on the other hand, feels more precise at slower speeds, gets faster way more gradually, complete with his iconic skating animation, and when he's fully boosting, it 1. Feels way more impactful, and 2. Restricts your turning just a bit to make navigating a more straightforward stage a little easier. They're all kind of nuanced changes, so I can't blame people for making the connection based on visuals, but the design of the stages mixed with the new abilities make the experience unrecognizable. Shadow's first new move is Chaos Control, the thing you see him use in just about every Sonic game but never got the chance to use for yourself. This completely freezes the stage and all of its hazards, and allows you to set up new routes for yourself, which is such a cool concept. I tried the game back in June at Summer Game Fest, and this was without question what I was the most excited to see expanded on, and it kinda delivered. It's usable in most levels, and there's plenty of opportunities to use it to your advantage, but it's not as central to the gameplay as I thought it'd be, and that's mostly because of Shadow's other new mechanics, the Doom abilities, and I'm kinda mixed on these. On one hand, it makes Shadow's gameplay really distinct from Sonic's, and keeps the stages feeling fresh from start to finish, but on the other, they can be a little too gimmicky for my taste. Overall though, they're good inclusions, and they're definitely more fun to use than the Wisps and Sonic Colors. My favorites are the Doom Wings, which are self-explanatory and kinda underused, and the Doom Blast, which has Shadow send a bad guy sky high before slamming him forward and teleporting wherever he ends up. It's both a satisfying attack and a useful maneuver. What I don't like as much are the Doom Surf and the Doom Morph abilities. The Surf is fine enough, and it's great that it avoids any water levels, but it's relied on a bit too much for as simple as it is, and the Morph is just fucking clunky. It lets you swim quickly through sludge and swing from these floating things, which is a fine enough concept, but the trajectory of the swing is always wonky, and the fact that it speeds up in bursts makes it kinda odd feeling. But that's really nitpicky, because none of it was experience halting in the slightest, and they made playing through this stellar selection of levels a treat the whole way through. Each stage has a first act that's fully 3D, and a second act that's fully 2D, just like Sonic Generations, but unlike that game, the 2D levels are like really good. It doesn't water down the gameplay at all. Shadow's entire moveset remains fully intact, and the designs incorporate more platforming than the 3D counterparts, but still keep an up-tempo. Honestly, I never dreaded one of these levels, and I can't say the same for the classic Sonic portion, so that's major props to Shadow Generations. But onto the levels themselves. Of course, kicking things off with the Space Colony Arc, and holy shit does it set a standard. There's so many shortcuts, these more open sections with a choose-your-own-adventure amount of routes, this multiverse of madness sequence, and enough visual variety to keep even the most rotted of TikTok brains fully engaged. Rail Canyon. I've never actually beaten Sonic Heroes, so this stage is brand new to me, and boy is it an adrenaline rush. The fucking trains chasing after you is sick. Kingdom Valley, one of 06's best levels, makes a grand return in a game that's actually polished. I think this is my favorite level here. The surf ability is used just the right amount. There's a couple sections where the level opens right up and there's actually an intimidating amount of options you have, and doom blasting enemies through stained glass is my new favorite pastime. Sunset Heights. I hate Sonic Forces, but this is actually a really good stage. It opens with a super long hallway section, so it's faithful to the source material, then it picks up a lot. This part where Shadow runs across the giant Eggman robo isn't interactive at all, but it is badass. Also, Act 2 changes the weather to be super rainy, and it feels like a night and day difference. Chaos Island captures the feeling of Sonic Frontiers, but without the open world. Mwah. Phenomenal. The last level, I think, is a spoiler, so if you're worried about it, jump to the timestamp on screen, but the sixth and final stage is a full-on radical highway, and it's the only level where both acts are 3D. These two heavily use the Doom wings, and it's a blast to play around with them. The only problem is, they kind of break the game. It allows you to go basically anywhere, and if you're not familiar with the layout, you're gonna go where you shouldn't and die a lot. And it's not really because of a lack of skill, it's just too much power. There's also the boss stages to talk about, and each one revives a classic villain. You get the Bio Lizard from Adventure 2, Metal Overlord from Heroes, Mephiles from Sonic 06, and, bigger spoiler alert, Devil Doom from Shadow the Hedgehog. They all bring a super fresh twist to the arena and incorporate the Doom abilities in really fun ways. Highlights are definitely the Metal Overlord fight on the high seas and the final boss, which incorporated all the Doom abilities. One of the things I was the most excited for in this game was, of course, the white space, because instead of being a 2D level select like Sonic's, Shadow's got a fully 3D overworld tying the stages together, and for what it is, it's perfect. It's basically a Sonic Frontiers island squeezed into a fraction of the size, so it's dense with Sonic set pieces, collectibles, and just shit to do. There's quite a few of these chunks of automation with rails and rings to fly through, but it makes getting around much faster, and there's still plenty of room to go off the beaten path, practice your new Doom abilities, and look for secrets. It also contains all the portals to the various stage challenges, and these are absolutely mandatory for progression, which I really didn't like at first, because I hate when games halt progression with essentially paywalls. But the challenges do give you a more in-depth look at these stages, and they're honestly pretty fun. My favorites are definitely the one ring challenges, where they load up on spikes and give you just 2 hits to make it through. I really like those. And they do help to pad the experience, because without those, there's only 6 stages with 2 acts a pop and 4 bosses, so it's a pretty quick playthrough. Even beating all of them, the playtime was still under 4 hours for me, which is really short. But again, these stages are endlessly replayable, and there's still another half of the game we haven't touched on yet. Now, I'll keep my thoughts on the Sonic Generations half of the game pretty brief because it's more or less the same game from 2011 with some slight but appreciated graphical enhancements. I love this game. I think it has the most consistently high-quality selection of levels of the entire series. The boost gameplay style is perfected, and the stages are super well designed and have lots of fun branching routes. Replaying the modern levels in this game is kind of comfort food to me at this point. They just flow so well and have a flawless balance of spectacle, speed, platforming, and replayability. What I don't like as much are the classic Sonic levels. They're not as fast-paced as the Genesis games, and the momentum never really felt right. But for what it's worth, it does help diversify the experience, and it is cool to see modern stages get a classic twist. Honestly, I would pay $50 for just a port of Sonic Generations. Hell, they charged $40 for Sonic Colors Ultimate. I think for the extra $10, getting double the content is well worth it. And also, this game's optimized and is genuinely the definitive way to play. They took a page out of Mario's book once again, and for once, I think did it better. Super Mario 3D World is a modern Mario game that appeals to both 3D and 2D Mario fans, and Sonic Generations is very much that same thing for the Sonic series. But where Bowser's Fury gives you a fundamentally different open world that's basically icing on the cake, Shadow Generations is like adding 2 scoops of ice cream. You've added an equally amazing experience to an otherwise quite good one, and made one perfectly complementary dessert. Sonic Generations is a beautiful celebration of Sonic's history, but the story is kinda shit. The writing just isn't good, and there's not much to it. But Shadow Generations compensates with a ton of that juicy lore and backstory for Shadow that adventure-era fans like myself have been craving. It also takes you through the new games that weren't around back in 2011, and it does it in a way that feels more impactful than just DLC stages. Look, I've been clamoring for a Sonic Adventure 3 ever since I was a kid, and while I'm still all for it, this game is one I didn't know I needed, but boy did I. After Generations first came out, I wanted to see more levels like it, but then Lost World comes around and does the exact opposite. Forces releases and absolutely butchers the format, Frontiers does a completely different thing, and they finally return to the style in 2024 by once again nailing it. It's a love letter to longtime Sonic fans, while also being a great entry point to the series, and the early review scores are proving that Sonic has kinda made a full comeback. With the film series breaking records, and the last couple Sonic games receiving praise from fans and critics alike, he's back, ladies and gentlemen, and this package is a clear indication of that. But what are your thoughts on Sonic X Shadow Generations? Have you played the game yet, or are you still on the fence about it? Leave your takes down in the comments, and thank you so much for watching.